all have our trials, but we're never alone. That's what makes our trials triumphant. Trials and Triumphs with your host, Pastor Ladina Boo.
Good morning. It's Pastor Ladina Boo from Stockton, Missouri. And my guest today, again from last week, is Meg Martinez. And you are with Gays Against Groomers. And, I probably failed to do what I should have done last week and ask you to define groomers. I had some gentleman, he's an older gentleman, he's in his 70s, and he's like, "What's a groomer?"
Yeah, it's hard for people to kind of understand a little bit. So there are different steps to really defining what a groomer is. First, it's just kind of pinpointing those who may feel like they don't belong, may feel like they don't have, a sense of self. And adults can kind of see this within kids. So one of the things that they do typically is they'll kind of find the little weakest link. This doesn't apply to all of them. This is just a standardized list of what psychiatrists have come up with from convicted pedophiles. So this is kind of like the general consensus, as you can tell the kids who have a lack of sense of self. Those ones are the ones that are going to be more easily to be influenced into whatever, the adult wants them to do, the groomer. From there, it's about befriending the child. Typically, this child doesn't have a great parental support system. They don't have a great adult support system. So they're usually trying to befriend the child, gain the child's trust, become that support system and that person within their life that they can rely on. From there, it's working into the topics that you want the child to believe. You want this child to wholeheartedly just believe everything that you have to say, and you work in your rhetoric little by little. Over time, you're able to get this child to do anything because you become that trusted adult where their parental figure should be. And a lot of them will try to steer the narrative away from their parents or their guardians into them as the trusted adult, and that your parents are not trusted anymore because they don't have your best interest. I do. So that's kind of like a basic rundown of what a groomer does, what a groomer is. And that's why we relate it back to a lot of the adult rhetoric that's happening within the schools, because it's the same thing. Your parents won't understand if you're coming out as transgender or non-binary. I understand and I will affirm. That's where we get the groomer type language from in Gays Against Groomers.
Yeah, our school systems scare me these days, because I think that they are the ones that are most heavily driving the transgender agenda. And, there's no reason to teach sex education to second graders. I mean, they don't even understand it. It's not in their mindset to even talk about it, but our schools are doing that. And so that's why we have this explosion of transgender people. And now I'm seeing an explosion of those who went transgender and now want to go back.
Yeah, there's a high rate of detransitioners. A lot of the studies don't really want to talk about it. They don't really want to highlight it because it proves everything that they're doing wrong. There's a lot of detransitioners who are coming out right now between the ages of 18 and 25, because this has actually been happening on a lot longer than what we have known so far, because it's only been thrusted into the spotlight recently. But it has been going on since about 2012, 2015, around there. Mostly started in the UK and kind of like trickled over here when it came to the minors. So there is a high rate of detransitioners right now, and they're making their voices heard. They're going public. They're taking the hospitals and the doctors to court for just affirming without even really talking to them or getting a good medical evaluation prior to transitioning the child.
I did speak with one transitioner a few weeks ago. She was on my show, and she was talking about nobody informed her of what this is going to do to her body with the hormone blockers and everything. And they did, she had the top surgery, and she had two counseling sessions, one 40 minutes long and one 50 minutes long. But the doctor and the psychologist and everybody were afraid of being classified as transphobic. you know, I'm not transphobic. I don't care what anybody says. I am not transphobic, but I am against mutilating children. And so today you were going to bring us some medical facts and figures and so forth about the medical side of transitioning, because you're actually doing a lot of harm to your child.
Yeah, and the puberty blockers that they're talking about, they're not reversible. So a lot of the studies that I've been looking into and that our group has been looking into are the long-term side effects of going on puberty blockers, which typically is going to be the first step. It's seeming to become a lot younger and younger, where these minors are kind of told about, oh, you're in the wrong body. I know we talked about that last week a little bit. And so that is kind of like making all of these parents almost want to just affirm. Okay, my little boy has all these female mannerisms. He says he wants to be a little girl. And so let's just affirm that. And so one of the steps that they are taking is, yeah, they'll take them to their doctor. Their doctor will talk to them. Typically right now, from what I've been hearing from a lot of these detransitioners, is that they only go to a therapist maybe once or twice. They talk to them about 30 to 40 minutes, and then boom, they're affirmed. And this is only saying that the parents are taking the proper steps. Well, the proper steps are being fast tracked as well. Beyond that, this is basically what I'm talking about is if the minor is below the age of 12. And so it's in that tenor phase where they are just barely getting ready to start puberty, which typically happens in kids between 9 and 11 is when it really, really starts. And this is where the doctors are really trying to push this pause on puberty. Well, you can't do that without having irreparable harm to your body, your skeletal system, your organs, your brain, muscle tissue.
Especially whenever they get to the hormones and stuff, because most of those are manufactured, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't really know what they're putting in your body whenever you get up to the cross-sex hormones and things like that. And it's my understanding that the puberty blockers and stuff can cause some real long-term effects for your child. I hear a lot about osteoporosis and stuff with transitioners.
Definitely. So I did pull up some stats, and the ones that I have used multiple times is, so the number one puberty blocker that they do use is Lupron. It has been a trusted drug for a long time, but the problem is that it's been a trusted drug to castrate convicted pedophiles, but it's also meant for men in their later years, typically after 35, to regain some of their testosterone if they start to lose it. It's meant for children who are going through a very rough puberty or a lower testosterone leveled puberty. It is very, very minute and small amount of young girls who are getting it because they may have an overabundance of estrogen, and it does require a little bit of testosterone for girls to go through puberty properly. Well, they're giving double to triple the amount of what they would normally do just to help a child go through a natural puberty, which is causing a lot of the side effects. So some of the major ones is there is a huge mood change within these kids. It's causing more mental instability. It causes irritability, restlessness, excessive anger, excessive just physical aggressiveness to these kids. It's almost like having somebody who is going through a severe mental disorder of any other sort that they may not understand. ADHD typically is one of the major ones, and you see it more with hyperactivity within young boys. Well, this is just increasing that. Another thing when it comes to the physical is they're having more headaches, eye problems, including blurred vision, double vision issues, dizziness, nausea. They're having I'm scrolling real quick. A lot of excess bleeding. They're having pain in their extremities, their arms and their legs. They're having back issues. They're having ligament sprains easily, or they're having weight gain issues. They're having breast tenderness because creating too much testosterone in boys can affect them having gynecomastia, which a
Hmm.
lot of people don't understand. So it's going to cause them to gain a lot of weight, which can in turn do the opposite of what they're really wanting to do. There is a higher risk of lack of bone mass density. The first portion of your life, you basically 1 to 3 years is when you really start to build your skeletal structure and your bones start to harden. After that, it is a steady process of your bone density going up. Well, they're noticing that a lot of these kids that are taking hormone blockers like Lupron, their bone mass density is significantly lower. And I believe it was about 20 to 25% if the child only took puberty blockers. If they went on to take hormones, the young boys who transition to women are not really having an issue because they are still fighting a high testosterone level. But the young girls, it is having a very negative side effect to where they are developing way, way slower than where they need to be in order to have a strong skeletal structure. That is one of the major things that they're seeing. The other thing
Oh,
that I really wanted to point out is that it is really causing a lot of extra mental health issues within these kids because if you stop your puberty and then say they grow up to be 17, 18, they never really progressed onto hormones, their brain never really had the chance to fully function and fully develop, so it is causing lapses in mental illness that may have never been there.
this stuff is terrifying to me. And, I get so upset whenever people do not understand what they're doing to their child and they're not looking into the long term effects. Um, you know, it's the in thing, it's the woke thing to go say, oh, well, my little tomboy here actually wants to be a boy, and not give them time to go through puberty and work out all their issues and so forth. And, after that, that tomboy probably is going to get a nice fancy dress and go to prom and
Mm.
be a girl. There's no reason to transition some girl that just wants to be a tomboy. There's a lot of them out there. I was that way. I love to go fishing and all this other stuff, and a lot of girls don't want to do that. But there's never been a time in my life whenever I felt like I needed to be um, a boy. It just didn't work that way. And it seems to me like we're destroying an entire generation, because after you're on all these hormones, then you're basically sterilized. You're not going to have children.
It is causing a lot of underdevelopment within the sex organs within these kids as well because it's preventing puberty. So therefore, in young females, their ovaries, their fallopian tubes, uterus, vaginal canal, they're not growing to where they need to be be an adult human. Same with little boys, it's causing shrinkage and non-growth within the testes and the penis. So that way, it is literally castrating them from the beginning because you're not allowing their organs to grow up and fully develop. Therefore, they will never have full function. One of the biggest problems within that is with the fertility, delaying the puberty. You typically see young boys transition to women. They want to have their gender assignment surgery, their bottom surgery, as they like to call it, but there's not enough tissue for these doctors to work with at that point. And so they have to take it from somewhere else. Typically, it's the colon that they do. There's a lifelong process that they have to do with dilation. Otherwise, that surgery is going to close up. Young girls, it's scary. It's really, really scary with that.
Yeah.
It's
It,
actually causing polycystic ovarian syndrome in young girls as well.
yeah. And lately I've been reading a lot of articles about the groomers. really focusing on the kids with ADHD or autism and stuff. And so, if you're autistic, I have two autistic grandchildren. And so, you've got a set pattern and so forth, and you don't want to deviate from it. And they're so easily influenced, and that terrifies me. Why are we going after those children who have issues to begin with? They're easily transformed for some person just giving them a story and saying, "Oh, you'll be better this way."
Yeah, it's a very scary part in that. And what I was finding was that, and I have all the links that I can send you after that for all the studies that I'm quoting. They're saying that there are 6 times more mental illness disorder that has been diagnosed in the kids that are being or are thinking or are feeling any type of gender dysphoria and wanting to transition. This is up from basically like 7% of just kids without any type of comorbidity mental disorders. The number one that they're seeing is, like you were correct, it's autism. It's also borderline personality disorder, which is something that is basically caused due to outside stressors. It's not caused to anything that is genetic or born, such as bipolar, ADHD, major depression disorder. A lot of those are you're actually born with, and how you grow up and go through your puberty is what really amplifies it, or you learn to adjust with it. These kids and these mental disorders, they all have a lack of sense of self. And that is one of the number one things that they're seeing. I know I grew up with bipolar, ADHD, and I also had BPD. BPD is the only one out of all of that that can be cured. It can be worked out through therapy. So having all of those while I was growing up, I did have a huge lack sense of self. And then if you throw in any type of trauma as a young child, like sexual trauma, it's just going to amplify that. So now all of these kids have this lack sense of self, and they're, well, I don't know if I feel like a boy or a girl, and it's being played off of. So the autism, borderline, and bipolar are the top three that a lot of these psychologists are coming out with studies. The main studies that are coming out that are actually done, that are, we like to use the word based, they don't have an agenda on either side. They're not controlled by an organization that is not bipartisan. They're all for this, and it's done by within the United States, like Human Rights Campaign. There's multiple different organizations that promote transgenderism. So if you look towards the UK, Western Europe, you're going to see a lot more bipartisan and long-term studies. The ones that I'm quoting today are anywhere from, I think the oldest one is 30 years, and then the youngest one is 15. And it's done through 1 to 3 year intervals where they're bringing the patients back in and really discussing and having, taking medical records, doing tests, seeing how the body reacts to all of these hormones that they're taking.
Yeah. Somehow I think they should have figured out a way to do all the tests before they started mutilating our children. That's just me. I've never understood why some people would even want to do that, and I've seen videos where young children were being transitioned, and they're in a doctor's office, and the doctor's trying to do something, and the kid's screaming, "No, no, no, I don't want to be a boy, I don't want to be a girl," whatever. And the parents are just going ahead and doing it. And those kind of situations break my heart. But then California, if you're 12 years old and you ran away out there, and they're not going to give you any information and just allow you to transition.
Correct. Yeah, it's really bad here in California. We have a lot of us who are trying to write up some legislation to help support it, also back the candidates who are against all of the proposals that are going through right now. We have plans with other parent groups to possibly go up and speak on legislation if it does make it to Senate. So it is very terrifying. A 12-year-old can run away. A parent can take their 12-year-old any age away from the other parent. If one of them wants to transition their child and one of them doesn't, the parent who does, they can just take the kid to California, and in typical law, you are that is considered kidnapping. You are not allowed to remove the child with outside of the state without both parents' consent if they're both their legal guardians. Well, California said no, we don't care. If they want to come here and transition their child, we're going to let them, and we're going to pay for it and give them subsidies and give them housing. It's a very, very hard thing to accept, especially for me and for us with Engaging Against Groomers who actually live here in California, because we're seeing it happen so often. We're seeing a lot of these kids walking around. When we went to Pride, it was almost horrifying to see how many, you can tell they are born biological girls that have had mastectomies, and they are clearly under the age of 17, 16.
That scares me.
Yeah, it is
They don't
terrifying.
even have the mental capacity at that age to even understand the long-term effects of this. And
And then you're also putting them on hormones at 12 years old, so their brain isn't fully developing to have that cognitive dissonance to be able to decipher long term.
mhm. Yeah, and I found that whenever I've spoken with people, the doctors are afraid of being classified as transphobic, and so they don't tell them the long-term effects. It's just like, okay, you feel this way, so we're going to let you be a boy next week. We're going to do all these surgeries and remove anything female from your body, and then try to pretend that you're a boy. And that's all it is in my mind. It's pretending. Okay, there's two genders. I don't care how many times the psychologist or anything, because every time I look at the figures, the number goes up. 73 different genders, 78 different genders. I have no idea. The number goes up so rapidly, and it's like, no, that is not correct. We have boys and we have girls.
Yeah, they're really starting to confuse these kids with the rhetoric that they're using within the schools, and it's really sad. Kids grow up with a natural sense of male and female. The way they do that is they correlate mom with female and dad with male. There's characteristics, there's body differences, there's difference in maternal and paternal instincts that happen within males and females when it comes to their children, and all it's doing is really confusing those, and it's making it more difficult for them to have some type of balance. And when you're doing that, you're actually promoting some form of lack of sense of self, and it's making it easier for these kids to be kind of, I use the word coerced, a lot of us in the Gays Against Groomers use coerced into believing what they want them to believe. Granted, a lot of the studies are saying that the transgender kids in, I believe it was 2019, was only 1.7% of the general population, but it's actually now up to 2.9. So while they're saying that it is not happening on a greater scale, the amount and the percentage of transgender kids has gone up, what is that, 1.2% in the last 3 years. The last study that came out was in 2021 on that. So the fact that it went up 1.3 years is a dramatic increase. And this is only looking at the average range of between 10 and 16. The median on that is about 12.9 to 13 years old.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's scary.
Like I say, I'm really confused by all of this, but I do realize that the people who are transitioning, they're doing so much harm to their bodies, and with the osteoporosis and all the other effects of this. And so it's like, it terrifies me that, like I say, I feel like we're destroying an entire generation with this, and we've got to get some control back in our schools and get our schools to stop pushing this.
And that is where it all seems to be starting. They're seeing a lot of their friends go through this. It's also a lot of social aspects that happen within school. If a child is, say, they're a little bit chubbier than everybody else and they get bullied for that, they now lose their lack of sense of self or they fall into depression. If they don't have that great of grades or they're too like high on their grades, and kids can get bullied and teased for everything. Nowadays they're also getting bullied and teased for their race and ethnicity. So there's a lot of other factors that cause kids to want to shy away from who they are, and that incomes, well, I can be accepted and loved and not bullied anymore if I join this group of people. Which, in talking to a lot of the detransitioners that I have, that's pretty much the course of what was happening. They had been starting teaching it at a younger age. They were bullied, they didn't fit in, they felt like they didn't know who they were. And during this entire time, the school is teaching them consistently about LGBTQIA plus. I don't even know the whole acronym anymore.
Yeah,
I just say
I've
the
been looking for the
LGBT.
full acronym here
Yeah,
lately. It's like, it changes so often, nobody can tell me.
exactly. So they're hearing all of this in school and they're seeing all of these other kids who are identifying as that being celebrated and promoted. And even in LA Unified School District, they have something that they call Queer All Year, where they're every single month celebrating and teaching different aspects of queer culture. Where if you ask any of us elder gays, as we call ourselves, that word is not okay. It it usually came with violence right after we heard it. So the indoctrination that's happening within schools is going into the medicalization. So the schools are almost creating part of a lack of sense of self, and then they're being diagnosed with gender dysphoria because they don't have that sense of self, and they base it on what their interests are. Then they go on to be medicalized, and then there's no way for them to come back after that. They're going to have a lot of long-term issues. They're going to have a lot of symptoms, and uh, it's insane how I don't understand what's going on with parents thinking that this is okay. Some of the doctors feeling that it's okay, but we do have a lot more coming out of the woodwork saying, I'm stopping this. I don't believe in this. I don't care what you call me. This is wrong. We're not going to transition children anymore. We're not going to, give them puberty blockers. And some of them are losing their license if they're with a major health organization. A lot of the smaller practices are losing a lot of business, but it's worth it in the end to them, which thank God for them.
Yeah, yeah, because I actually saw one school district in a news article yesterday, and I can't remember where they are. But the governor signed into law the fact that he didn't care about the federal mandates because the federal government mandates that you teach this in most respects. And he said, he doesn't care about the federal mandates. You're not going to teach that in our schools. And I'm sitting back going, yay.
Yeah, that was actually in Virginia. I saw the same
Awesome.
article. Yeah, it was in Virginia. And part of that bill that he also signed in was that teachers have 2 weeks to notify the parents if their child comes to school and says that they are the opposite gender of what they were born as and wants to be referred to by a different pronoun or a different name. They are now required within 2 weeks to tell the parents. So we are so happy about that. We're celebrating that in Gays Against Groomers. It is such a win. This is what we've been pushing for really, really hard within the schools is keep the parental rights and parental information intact. They have a right to know what's going on with their kids. These are not the teacher's kids. They may be babysitting them for 8 hours a day, but it's not their kids. And the fact that we finally have governors coming together and saying, I don't care what the federal government says. We are not medicalizing our kids. We're not indoctrinating, and we're keeping the parental rights intact for these parents and these children.
Yeah, because there's so many school districts that refuse to tell the parent that their child is using a different pronoun. And I've seen schools that have these closets. And so you go to school looking like, little Susie, and you get to school and they give you clothes so you can turn around and say, I'm Bruce. And they don't tell the parents. And those children don't belong to the federal government. They don't belong to the school districts or the school boards. And for them to hide all of this from a parent, I think it should be illegal. There's no reason for them to be doing this.
I agree. I agree 100%. There is policy in place in California, which is another thing that we and the parents are really trying to push against, as well as a lot of the teachers, that if they do inform the parents outside of the child's consent, they are liable to be fired for breaking state policy for the teachers union. We I have personally, and I know many of us in California in Gays Against Groomers have been in contact with three specific teachers. Two of them are in San Diego. One of them is here in LA. And I do believe there's a fourth one that our northern members are speaking with as well, who were all fired for letting the parents know what was going on with their kids and that their kids were identifying as something else than their birth. The fact that they were fired is insane to me. They were doing the right thing. The one teacher in LA, he actually worked at the Glendale Unified District. He's gone to many interviews, many legislatures, and spoken at every single school board within Glendale. He was labeled everything under the sun that you can think of that is negative, but he's still fighting. And him and two other teachers are actually suing their school districts right now. The two in San Diego teamed up and paired together and are suing the school district for wrongful termination, which I 100% agree with. The teacher in Glendale, he is gay. He just wanted to fight against all of the ideology that was happening. He didn't believe in it. He didn't think that children should be hearing this or learning about this as early as they were. It's terrifying to think that a teacher could be fired for doing the right thing when it comes to the children and the health of the children and the mental well-being.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
happening.
Which is another thing. It's like the federal government is, pushing so many things on our school districts. And it used to be, whenever everybody remembered their constitution, that the school districts and the schools in each particular state could mandate what was taught in their schools, and now the federal government is pushing all these things on there, and they're not good for our kids. I want to go back to the little 4-year-old girl who was on some TV show, and she was looking at a skeleton. She was telling everybody what the parts were, and she got to the hip structure, and she said, this is a girl. And he's going, why? And she said, because of the hip structure. The hip structure is different in males and females. And she was only 4. And it's like, okay, bring me more 4-year-olds.
That's when proper education was actually happening. There's two districts in California that we're extremely proud of right now. Temecula has had a hard fought fight, and finally, the school district is coming around and listening to the parents, and they are pushing back now and banning a lot of the ideology that's being taught. And Chino, the superintendent, basically told the rest of the school district in California, no, we're not doing this. We are done. We are done hiding from the parents. We are done with these destructive books. They are not going to be in our schools. We are done with the gender ideology. We are done with teaching this to our kids at an early age. And we are done taking away parental consent when it comes to sexual education.
Amen.
The LGBT agenda was one thing that the parents were not able to opt their children out. And now it's gone back to, well, if you want to let your children hear about this, we will still hold the meetings, or we'll still hold the classes, but you have to agree to it first.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it's amazing.
I'm so glad they've got that far, because, I would think that most parents would not want their children hearing this at the ages that they're starting. And I've noticed too a number of libraries that are pulling out of the main library association over the same thing, this ideology and so forth. And so a lot of them have started another library group that any state can join, so that they get away from all of the gender ideology books and so forth that they have stuffed our libraries full of.
Definitely, I've noticed that too, especially within this last week. A lot of them are becoming more prominent and more outspoken about it, which I think is great. Our organization thinks is great, and we've been promoting those libraries and celebrating them all over our social media. There is one in particular that we are really looking at speaking with, and we disagree, and we're probably going to go public because they're not responding to our emails of disapproval. They're not wanting to sit down and have a conversation with us on what's happening. They're actually bringing in extra of these banned books on the LGBTQ
Alphabet.
whatever. Um, we call it the alphabet soup. The alphabet soup. And they're giving away a free backpack for every child who comes in and rents one of these books out. So they're creating incentives
Horrible.
for kids to come in and check out severe gender ideology books that have a lot of pseudo porn. I mean, if anybody wants to understand what I'm talking about, you can easily Google "this book is gay." That is one of the major offenders, or queer theory. That's another one. That one highly talks about pedophilia, has minor adult relationships in detail, graphic detail in that novel.
And they put
It's
them in the children's section.
they do. They do. They have them in the children, adolescent, and teens, but any child that can read can go pick anyone up, and they're not. It's not like a movie that you go to that's PG-13 or R-rated 17 and over. They're not going to check your ID to check that out. They're just going to let you do it.
You know, like I say, this stuff has been terrifying me for months, and that's why I really wanted to get into it. And I thank you again for coming on here and speaking with me. Uh, there's a lot of stuff going on in our schools and in our country and in our libraries. And I do not understand people that take their child to a drag show. That terrifies me. Why? There is no reason to take your child to a drag show or the drag parades and naked bicycle races and stuff. And grown men riding a bicycle down the street with all their junk hanging out and so forth. And then somehow or another, a 10-year-old child, a 10-year-old girl, managed to be entered in that same bike race. We've got to protect our kids. We can't keep allowing all this stuff to go on and make these decisions about transitioning our children. Let them grow up. Let them get up to an age where they really understand what's going on and they have a better control of their body, better control of their mind. If it's an adult and they want to transition, that's their right. But stop messing with the kids.
Definitely. They just really need to leave them alone. You mentioned drag shows. I just wanted to throw in there right now. We are in the works. I believe it is this coming up weekend. Our New York chapter will be out there in New York City protesting peacefully and calmly. If anything gets out of hand, they're leaving. But our New York chapter is going to actually go protest a drag queen story hour that's being read to all ages. It's been a repeat thing. And the thing that I don't think people realize about the drag queen story hours, it's turned into a corporation. They now make their own books that they promote, and it's still promoting the same ideology. It's now just teaching it to 2 and 3 year olds. And you have, this highly animated person with all of this costuming on, and it looks fun and amazing, but really the background history of it isn't great. It is an adult burlesque show, for lack of a better word. It should be 21 and plus always. 18 plus, okay, you're 18 years old, you can do whatever you want. You go to a brewery, they are 18 plus, whatever, I don't care. But when it comes to children, we've all seen online the terrors that are happening in front of them. And it's not all drag queens, because a lot of them actually agree with us. We have a few in the organization that are just like, no, the vast
Yeah.
majority are not like that. It is not innocent.
And all these mothers that celebrate their little boys dressing up and dancing in bars and a drag show. Um, that's damaging your child. I don't care what you say. You're damaging your child. You're damaging their psyche, and you're not allowing them to do what little boys do. You're spending all your time taking them out to buy dresses.
I don't believe that kids should hold back their artistic side, but there are much better ways to do that. Put them in ballet or jazz class or tap if they're interested in dancing.
Right.
That has costuming in it as well. If they're interested in sewing, sit there and learn how to sew with them. I don't feel if a little girl wants to play football, let her go play football. So I don't feel like gender stereotypes when it comes to gender has to be hindered. I just don't think it
Yeah.
should be pushed. They are the opposite gender,
Yeah.
especially on
Don't
little
push them one
girls.
direction. Let them
Yeah.
be artistic. Let them do what they want to do. My son, I put him in ballet classes when he was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old and stuff. He wanted to do that because the girl next door was in ballet and she was very good. And so he did ballet for 3 or 4 years and then he went to football. So, give them a chance to get out there and express themselves, but don't do it in a drag show. You know.
Yeah. I just wanted to touch back to the medicalization part and kind of explain to your viewers why at Gays Against Groomers we really, really push Save the Tomboys. One of the main reasons is because the side effects of taking testosterone has dramatic health issues and ramifications versus boys taking estrogen. If they were to go and wean themselves off the estrogen, their voice hasn't changed. They may have grown breast tissue or some fat where, girls usually fill out on the hips, on the butt, a little bit on the stomach, thighs. But that's not going to permanently damage them the way that testosterone does for little girls. It's causing vocal fry, where the tendons within the vocal cords are actually expanding and causing stretching, which is why their voices get deeper. It's causing a lot of heart issues. It's causing a lot of colon issues, kidney, excessive acne to the point where it's cystic and scarring. It's causing the facial hair to grow. It's causing the shrinkage. Even if they are more towards the end of their puberty, it's causing the shrinkage of their fallopian tubes, ovaries, which is causing sterilization because, like I said earlier, it creates polycystic ovarian syndrome. If somebody wants to Google that, I grew up with it. I know how hard it is with that, and my testosterone was too high. I cannot imagine actually being injected with it all of the time. It's it's causing breast cancer, liver and kidney disease, high calcium levels. It can make them bedridden, and it's causing enlarged colons, enlarged bladders. It's causing high cholesterol, triglycerides, which means it's going to lead towards diabetes and any other type of heart condition. It's causing heart attacks and strokes, a higher rate of little girls than it does in little boys. Taking estrogen, it's almost double to just below triple the amount of heart conditions that it's creating. This is why we put such a stress on Save the Tomboys. The ramifications of medicalizing little girls is so much harsher, so much higher of having side effects and difficulties out of it than it does little boys, even though it does for them as well. And the rate of the push of these little girls to get medicalized faster seems to be extremely high. little girls tend to be more likely to experience any type of mental health comorbidity as well that is untreated. So we do want to save all of our kids. We want to save all the little boys from the indoctrination. We want to make them feel uplifted if they're effeminate and not that they are a woman or a girl. We want to help just reinforce these kids are not born in the wrong body. It's just very hard to do that from the outside when we're
Uh-huh.
being silent so much, whereas it's huge. Every single school district, every single teacher almost has either been forced or actually believes in this. Same with the medical professionals, and they're convincing the parents. They convince them by saying that, would you rather have a dead daughter or an alive son? Well, a lot of the studies, especially one in Sweden that I was reading this morning, is showing from 2015 to 2022, I believe the study came out September 28th, 2022. They followed children that had mental health comorbidities, where before they started any type of medicalization up until the last point, their suicidality did not go down. They are actually 43% more likely to have suicidality, whereas normal, um, I hate the word cisgender, but normal non-trans identifying children are at 7%. So it's not showing that them transitioning is actually having that big of a difference on the suicidality. It's untreated comorbidity mental illnesses that they have. It's the depression, like I said, the ADHD, the bipolar, the borderline personality, whatever. The autism is a big one. They have all of these comorbidities that are not being treated, so it's not treating the suicidality. If anything, they say that they feel better, but then once they become an adult, usually around 20, it increases even more because they realize that they can't go back. They can't put their breasts back on. They can't undo a bottom surgery. They can't undo the side effects that they have on their body.
Mhm. Well, we
Yeah.
probably could go on for weeks on this, but
Yes,
we're out of
yes, we
time
can.
right now. Um,
Yeah.
and I hope you gained some information today and you can understand more about groomers and about the situation that's happening, especially in our schools. And, we need to stop destroying our children. We just need to let our children
Please.
be children. Please do not be doing this. Let your child be a child. And when they get old enough to make their own decisions and they're adults, that's, you know, they can do what they want at that point, but don't destroy your child. That's all I ask. So, anyway, I thank you again for joining me, and I'm sure I'll call you later. But we're going to go now. So, thank everybody for coming.
Thanks for having me.